I knew the moment the gate slammed shut behind me that my life was about to split into a before and an after. Because the woman standing on the other side, arms crossed, eyes burning with self-righteous fury, was the reason I bought 50 acres far away from anyone like her. And still, she found me. I didn't know a gate could shake from pure rage, but hers rattled like it was holding back a storm. "Open it," she barked. "Now." Her voice wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut through the cold morning air and lodge itself under my skin. I stood there, one hand resting on the lock, staring at the boundary line I had claimed so intentionally, so desperately. 50 acres. My escape from noise. My escape from rules. My escape from the choking grip of the HOA that had controlled every inch of my previous life. But somehow this woman believed she still owned the world outside her tiny kingdom. Her name was Karen, and this locked gate was about to become the barrier she could never cross again. The wind carried dust across the long gravel road as we stared each other down. I could smell the morning fog mixed with the faint scent of pine sap from the forest behind me. The silence around us felt heavy, like the land itself was listening, waiting to see what would break first, her patience or my peace. Karens don't like silence. They need control like lungs need air. "You can't block this road," she snapped. "The HOA requires access through here. This gate is an obstruction, and you need to remove it immediately." Her confidence was unnerving, but familiar, too familiar. For a moment, memories flashed behind my eyes. The arguments, the notes taped to my door, the fines, the smug smiles from board members who thought they could dictate the color of my lawn chairs. I remembered selling my old house with shaking hands, just to get out. I remembered the weight lifting when I saw this land, quiet, untouched, completely free of their reach. Or so I thought. "This road isn't yours," I finally said, my voice low, steady. "It's on my property, and I'm not removing anything." She laughed. A short, sharp burst. "You think property lines apply to me? To us? That's adorable." Something in the way she said "us" sent a chill down my spine. I'd heard rumors, whispers from the nearest town. How the HOA had been trying to expand, pushing boundaries farther and farther from the original subdivision. I didn't care much at first. Their politics were their problem. But the moment she stepped onto my land, everything became personal. Her face twisted in irritation when I didn't move. She stepped closer to the gate, gripping the bars like she wanted to rip them out of the ground. "I'm going to report you," she hissed. "You can't just build a barricade because you feel like it. We have rules." Rules. The word echoed in my mind like a threat. Behind me, the early sunlight broke over the treetops, casting long shadows across the dirt road. The birds had gone quiet. Even the breeze paused. "I don't live under your rules anymore," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, you will," she whispered. "You'll find out you made a very big mistake moving out here. The kind of whisper that crawls under your skin and stays there. The kind that promises war." I stepped back, my boots crunching against gravel, and tightened the lock on the gate until the metal clicked loudly, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. Karen stared at it, at me, at the land behind me, and something dark crossed her expression, like entitlement twisting into obsession. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was the moment Karen realized she couldn't control me, and the moment she decided she'd try anyway. Before all of this, before the gate, before the shouting, before the feeling that my land had turned into a battlefield, I was just a guy trying to breathe again. For years, I worked as a wildlife photographer. Not the glamorous kind that gets flown to Antarctica or the Amazon. More like hiking at dawn with a thermos of burnt coffee, waiting hours for a single shot of a fox slipping through tall grass. I loved the quiet. I loved the stillness. And more than anything, I loved the freedom of open space. Maybe that's why the HOA had suffocated me so badly. When my wife passed away 3 years earlier, peace became more than a preference, it became survival. Noise felt like sandpaper on my nerves. Crowds drained me, and rules, unnecessary rules, felt like bricks piling on my chest. So when I sold the house we'd lived in together, I promised myself the next place would be different. Not fancy, not crowded, just mine. That promise led me down a winding rural road, 30 minutes from the nearest paved highway, to a piece of land that didn't look like much from a distance. Just hills, trees, and an old dirt path that split the acreage in two. But when I stepped out of the truck and the wind brushed against my face, something inside me softened for the first time in months. The land smelled like cedar and earth. It sounded like nothing but wind and distant birds. And it felt wide open. 50 acres of untouched freedom. I bought it the same week. The cabin I built wasn't big. Just 2 bedrooms, wide windows, and a wraparound porch where I could set up my camera gear. I'd wake up to mist rolling off the hills, brew coffee that tasted like smoke and pine, and shoot photos of the deer that wandered past my fence line. For a while, life was exactly what I needed. Quiet, predictable.
Mine.
Then Karen arrived. I met her for the first time while unloading lumber from my trailer. I didn't even know there was a subdivision nearby, much less an HOA. She wore a sun hat, spotless sneakers, and the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be the new owner," she said, walking right onto my land like it belonged to her. "We've been expecting you." Expecting me? I didn't know her. I didn't know we included her. And I sure didn't like the way she examined my cabin, like she was appraising it for inspection. "I'm Karen, head of the HOA board," she said, tapping a clipboard against her hip. "Don't worry, we have guidelines for new builds, but I'm sure we can get you up to standard." I remember staring at her, confused. "What HOA?" The words came out flat, almost stupid sounding. "Oh, sweetie," she chuckled. "This whole area is under HOA jurisdiction. Didn't your realtor tell you?" My stomach dropped. "No," I said, "because this isn't part of your subdivision." She stepped closer, too close. "Well, we're expanding. It's inevitable. Growth is good for everyone. We'll need to go over the rules, but first..." Her eyes drifted to the open dirt road, my road. "I'm going to need you to remove that temporary gate. It might confuse residents trying to access community trails." That was the moment everything shifted. The peaceful land I'd fallen in love with suddenly felt like a contested border. My dream of silence felt fragile. The air felt heavier. I didn't argue that day. I didn't push back. I just nodded and watched her walk away, her footsteps crunching confidently over gravel she didn't own. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. I told myself she'd leave me alone. But deep down, I felt the first crack in the peace I had fought so hard to find. A crack that would become a war. The first problem didn't arrive with noise or confrontation. It arrived quietly, like most dangerous things do. A white envelope sat tucked under a rock on my porch railing one morning. No stamp, no return address, just a printed label, HOA notice, immediate action required. My stomach tightened. I opened it with cold fingers, standing in the soft morning light as the world around me slowly woke up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Violation number 1. Unauthorized gate obstructing community right-of-way.
Fine. $150.
Compliance deadline. 72 hours. I read it twice, then a third time. A laugh escaped my throat, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. I looked around at the towering pines, the empty gravel road, the vast stretch of untouched land. No houses.
No subdivisión.
No community anything. "How are you people finding me out here?" I muttered, scanning the tree line like they might be hiding in the bushes, watching. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I took the notice and drove straight to the clustered neighborhood 2 miles away, the one I'd visited only once, briefly, before buying my land. Their manicured lawns looked so out of place compared to the rugged wilderness I'd chosen. I parked near the community center and walked inside. Karen was there. Of course she was. She looked up from a stack of papers and smiled like she'd been waiting for me. Well, I wondered how long it would take you to come down here." I handed her the notice. "What is this?" I asked. She glanced at it casually. "A standard violation. Nothing serious. Just remove the gate within the deadline and pay the fine."
Is here.
"The gate isn't on your land." It's on mine. She sighed dramatically. Oh, sweetheart. Your attitude is going to make this difficult. We've already established that your road might be used by residents in the future. No, I said firmly. You established that. I didn't agree. Her smile thinned. You're part of the perimeter zone. That gives us limited jurisdiction. Perimeter zone? I'd never heard the term in my life. This isn't legal, I said softly, trying to control the anger rising in my chest. She tilted her head. If you'd like to dispute it, you can attend our monthly board meeting. But I should warn you, our decisions are final. Something about the way she said final made my skin crawl. I walked out before the conversation could escalate further, but the notice still burned in my hand like a warning shot. 2 days later, the second notice appeared, this time taped directly to the gate. Violation number 2. Failure to comply with prior notice.
Fine. $300.
Additional note. Resident behavior observed as uncooperative. Uncooperative. As if I was her disobedient child. I ripped the paper off, the tape snapping loudly in the stillness. The forest seemed to brace around me as frustration clawed up my throat. I muttered to myself, she can't be serious. She cannot be this serious. But she was. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and drenched the land in orange light, I heard footsteps on gravel. Slow, deliberate, too confident to be an animal. Karen stood at the edge of my driveway with 2 board members behind her. Men with folded arms and blank expressions. She waved a clipboard. Missing your notices? I'm ignoring your notices, I replied. One of the men stepped forward. Sir, failure to comply with HOA requirements will result in escalated action. This isn't HOA property, I snapped. You don't have any authority here. Karen smirked. Oh, we'll see about that. Her voice was soft, almost gleeful. I felt the temperature drop. Not in the air, but inside me. Because for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that went beyond annoyance. It was intent. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was targeting me. And as they turned to leave, she paused midway down the driveway, looked back, and said the line that made the hair on my arms stand up. You should have just removed the gate. Now things are going to get complicated. The next week felt like living in the shadow of a storm. Quiet at first, then suddenly violent. It started with trespassing. I woke one morning to the crunch of gravel outside my window. When I stepped onto the porch, half awake, I saw a man I didn't recognize pacing along my property line with a measuring wheel. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just kept rolling that wheel across my land as if I didn't exist. What are you doing? I called out. He clicked a stopwatch. Hua inspetin. My jaw tightened. You're standing on private property. He shrugged. We were told this area might soon fall under HOA extension protocols. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Extension protocols? Karen was inventing rules faster than I could fight them. Get off my land, I said. He hesitated, then turned away without a word, disappearing down the road like a ghost. But the damage was done. Something inside me cracked that day. A tension I'd tried to ignore now sat in my chest like a stone. 3 days later, the harassment became impossible to ignore. I came home from photographing deer near the lower creek to find bright orange spray paint on my gate. Huge letters. Sloppy. Angry. Remove. Illegal. The words dripped down the metal like they'd been carved with hatred. My blood boiled. My hands shook. This wasn't a notice. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an attack. I took a step back, the smell of fresh paint stinging my nose. My mind raced, jumping between rage and disbelief. Who does this? Who thinks they're above the law? I knew who. Karen. Or someone acting under her orders. That night, I sat on the porch long after the sun went down, the crickets humming in the dark woods. Every sound felt sharper. Every rustle felt like a threat. I kept staring at the gate, illuminated by my porch light, waiting for someone to come back. The helplessness hit me hard. I'd bought this land to heal, to escape control. But now I felt cornered again. just with bigger trees and more silence to hide the chaos. Then came the lies. A deputy truck pulled up my driveway one afternoon. The tires crunched loudly enough to send birds scattering from the branches. He stepped out, tipping his hat. Got a call about unauthorized construction. They said you're blocking an access road for community use. My breath left my lungs. Who called? I asked, though I already knew. He glanced at his notes. HOA board president, Karen Fletcher. Of course. I led him to the gate and showed him the property map I kept in my truck. This road is mine, I said. Every inch. The gate is on my land, not theirs. He scanned the map, then nodded. Looks that way. You're fine. But, he lowered his voice, you might want to keep documentation on you. These people seem persistent. Persistent. Polite word for obsessed. After he left, I walked back toward the cabin. The autumn leaves crunching under my boots. My heart pounded with a mixture of fury and dread. I can't keep living like this, I whispered to myself. Not again. But the worst moment, the one that shattered any remaining patience, came 2 nights later. I woke to the sound of an engine idling outside. Low. Rumbling. Wrong. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a jacket, and grabbed my flashlight. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks as I stepped onto the porch. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. I hadn't even realized it had gone cold. Sleep had become a stranger. My eyes felt raw, my thoughts heavy, like each one carried its own weight. The gate was just outside that window, the same gate that had triggered all of this. I just wanted peace, I whispered to myself, the words barely audible over the rain. But peace felt farther away than ever. My mind replayed everything, Karen's threats, the trespassing, the vandalism, the lies to law enforcement. It all swirled in my head like a storm of its own. I couldn't outrun the déjà vu. This was exactly what the old HOA had done to me. This was exactly what I'd moved here to escape. Except now, there was no neighbor on the other side of a fence. No board meeting to show up to. No lawyer 2 blocks away. This was wilderness. And somehow, the HOA had followed me into it like a shadow determined to swallow the light. A loud crack of thunder rattled the cabin. My breath hitched. Fear had crept into me slow and quiet over the last week. But tonight it felt like it had settled in my bones. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was scared. Scared of what she'd try next. Scared of losing the only place that had felt like home since my wife died. The storm grew heavier. Wind twisting through the trees until branches slapped against each other like bones clacking. The power flickered once. Then again. Then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. The only sound was the rain pelting the metal roof and my own uneven breathing. I sat there for a long time listening, thinking, breaking a little. It wasn't until my phone buzzed that I snapped out of it. A single message lit up the screen. A name I hadn't expected. Tom. Saw lights near your road last night. Everything okay? Tom was the closest thing I had to a friend out here. An old rancher who lived a mile north. Quiet but kind. The kind of man who understood solitude the way some people understand music. My hands trembled as I typed back. HOA problems. They're showing up on my land. 10 minutes passed. Then a knock at my door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Hey! Tom's voice came through the wood. It's me. I opened the door to find him soaked from the rain. Hat dripping. Flashlight in hand. Figured you shouldn't be alone tonight, he said simply. Those words hit me harder than the storm. He stepped inside, took off his hat, and looked around the cabin before meeting my eyes. You look tired, he said gently. I am, I admitted. They're pushing me, Tom. Harder than before. Harder than I can fight. He studied me for a moment, then leaned against the counter. You bought this land for peace, he said. Not to be bullied out of it. I swallowed hard. I don't know what to do. If I fight her, she escalates. If I ignore her, she escalates. Then you fight smarter, he said. Not harder. Those words sank deep, cutting through the fog in my mind. Tom wasn't a man of speeches, but what he said next changed everything. She's counting on you being scared. Don't give her that satisfaction. You've got something she can't stand. What's that? I whispered. Boundaries, he said, and the guts to enforce them. Lightning flashed outside, turning the room white for half a second. And for the first time in days, the fear inside me flickered. Not disappearing, but shifting, turning into something warmer, something sturdier. Resolve. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But I knew this. Karen had pushed me into a corner, and now I was going to push back. The storm finally broke by morning. The world outside looked washed out. Wet earth, dripping pine needles, and a pale gray sky stretching across the hills like a faded blanket. I hadn't slept, but something in me felt steadier after Tom's visit. Still, I needed answers. I needed proof. Something solid to fight back with. Tom stayed for breakfast. Black coffee, reheated biscuits, and the quiet company of someone who'd lived through enough storms to know when one wasn't over yet. You said they're claiming your land is part of some expansion, he said, leaning over a map I'd spread on the table. But you ever check your deed packet thoroughly? I frowned. I looked it over when I bought the land. Tom tapped the table with a knuckle. Look again. His tone wasn't forceful, but it carried weight. When he left, I pulled the old, weathered deed folder from my filing cabinet. It still smelled faintly of dust and cedar from the previous owner's barn. I set it on the table and opened the clasps, letting the worn paper spill across the wood. Most of it was familiar survey lines, plat maps, notarized signatures. But one envelope I didn't recognize slid out from between two documents. A thin, yellowing envelope stamped with faded ink. Private. Amendments and historical easement notes. My pulse quickened. I opened it carefully, like it might crumble in my hands. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten, old, detailed. The handwriting belonged to Harold Jennings, the previous owner. The same owner who'd lived on this land for 50 years. The first line made my breath catch. This land has never been, and cannot legally be, under any HOA jurisdiction. I froze. My eyes raced across every line. Harold wrote about a property dispute that happened 27 years earlier. Apparently, the very same subdivision had once tried to extend their reach, long before Karen ever showed up. They'd attempted to claim his land as a community scenic route and tried to annex his road. But he'd fought it, and he'd won. Attached to the letter was a photocopy of a county judge's ruling. No homeowners association shall claim governance, authority, or jurisdiction over the Jennings property line or the associated private access road. All rights remain solely with the landowner. A chill rolled down my arms, not fear, but something close to relief. This was it. The leverage. The truth Karen hoped I'd never find. I kept reading. At the bottom of Harold's note, a final sentence was underlined twice. If anyone ever tries again, show them this ruling. And if they still push, record everything. Record everything. The words echoed through me. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly across the floor. My heart thudded in my chest. Not from panic this time, but from the electric jolt of possibility. I grabbed my jacket and rushed to the gate. The rain had softened overnight, leaving the ground spongy. Water dripped from the trees in slow, rhythmic taps. I crouched beside the gatepost, running my hand along the metal, checking the chain. That's when I saw it. A tiny black lens tucked beneath the branch of a cedar tree. Almost hidden. Almost invisible. A camera. My stomach tightened as I leaned closer. The device was cheap, battery-powered, Wi-Fi capable. Not the kind a professional would use. The kind a nosy neighbor would. My voice came out a little shaky. You've got to be kidding me, Karen? Someone had been watching my property, monitoring me, recording me. My anger spiked, but underneath it something stronger took root. Purpose. I plucked the camera from its hiding place and held it in my hand. Rainwater dripped from the needles above, tapping against my knuckles. This was evidence. This was illegal. And this was the final crack Karen didn't mean to reveal. I stood there for a moment, breathing steadily, staring across my land. The fear that had wrapped around my ribs like a vice loosened. The helplessness that had kept me up at night shifted. I felt something ignite. Slow, steady, unshakable. Determination. Karen had played her last silent card. She wanted a war? Fine. But now I wasn't walking into it blind. I had documents. I had proof. I had a witness if I needed one. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. This wasn't her territory. This wasn't her right. This was my land. And it was time to remind her that I didn't sleep at all that night. Not because I was scared anymore, but because for the first time in months I finally had the upper hand. And by sunrise I was ready. Completely calm. Dangerously calm. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee while Karen paced outside my gate like a guard dog who just realized the mailman was actually a wolf. She kept jabbing her phone toward the lock, yelling something about violations and community bylaws. Funny thing was, none of those bylaws applied to me. Not after what I discovered. Not after the truth in that recording. I stepped outside, slow and steady, letting the gate motor hum gently as it rolled open. Karen straightened her posture. Fake confidence. Real panic. "We need to talk," she snapped. Her voice shook. "Good." I pulled out my phone, the same one filled with hours of her threats, illegal demands, and that one crucial recording of her admitting she forged signatures to force my land into the HOA. I hit play. Her own voice spilled into the cold morning air. "He'll never know the difference. The county won't check anyway." Karen froze. Her expression cracked in half. First disbelief, then fear. Real fear. The kind you feel when you finally realize you picked a fight with the wrong person. Where did you get that?" she stammered. I tilted my head. "From the security cameras you told me were too ugly for the neighborhood." She opened her mouth, but I continued. "See, here's the thing, Karen. Forging documents? That's a felony. Extortion? Another one. Harassment? I've got months of proof." Her lips trembled. Her phone slipped in her hand. The queen of the HOA finally looked small. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I stepped aside as 3 trucks rolled up the road, county officials, a sheriff's deputy, and the land commissioner. Karen's eyes widened like she was watching her entire empire burn. One of the officials stepped out and unfolded a stack of documents. "Ma'am, we received a report last night. Multiple reports, actually. And after reviewing the evidence provided," he paused. "You are under investigation for fraud, property interference, and abuse of authority." Her knees buckled. She tried to point at me. He's lying. He tampered with." The sheriff raised a hand. "That's enough. We'll sort this downtown." Karen's voice fell apart into broken pleas as they guided her toward the deputy's car. I watched silently, hands in my pockets, heart steady for the first time in forever. Her whole army of HOA board members showed up soon after. Faces pale, whispering, trying to understand how their unstoppable leader was suddenly powerless and shaking in the back seat of a cruiser. I handed them a folder. Inside, every document that proved my land had never been part of their HOA, never subject to their rules, never theirs to touch. One board member looked up at me. "So, what happens now?" I shrugged. "That's up to the county. But as for me," I smiled, real, calm, victorious. "I'm done letting people like her control my life." The sheriff's car door slammed, echoing through the trees. Karen's face twisted with rage, fear, and the realization that she had finally, officially lost. The car pulled away. The dust settled. My gate hummed closed again, this time not as a barrier, but as a final chapter. And for the first time in a long time, justice finally, beautifully, felt like mine. The days after Karen's arrest felt strangely quiet. Not the uneasy kind of quiet, the kind that sits heavy on your shoulders, but a peaceful quiet, a silence that finally let my home breathe again. For the first time in months, the land felt like mine. My mornings stopped starting with arguments or threats. My phone stopped buzzing with fake fines or HOA warnings. The air even felt different. Lighter, warmer, almost grateful. I remember stepping onto my porch the morning after everything happened, holding a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sun melt across the field. The golden light touched the fence line, the trees, the gravel road, and it struck me just how much I had forgotten what peace looked like. It wasn't until the chaos ended that I realized how much it had seeped into my bones. The late-night pacing, the constant checking of my cameras, the way every knock on the door made my chest tighten. Slowly, those feelings faded. Slowly, the world returned to the way it was meant to be. Simple, steady, mine. A deputy visited later that week. He handed me a brief update. Charges pending. Investigation expanding. Multiple homeowners stepping forward with similar complaints. Apparently, Karen had been terrorizing people long before I arrived. I was just the first one who fought back with something she couldn't silence. The truth. When the deputy left, he paused at the end of my driveway. "You did the right thing," he said. And for a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt through any of this validation. Not victory, not revenge, just release. My land became quiet again after that. I fixed the broken side gate. I rebuilt the mail post she kept knocking over. I repainted the shed she fined me for, this time in the color I chose, not the one she demanded. Each small task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a part that had been buried under her rules, her threats, her control point. One evening, my friend Lucas, one of the only people who stuck by me through all of it, dropped by with 2 sodas and a lazy grin. He sat with me on the tailgate of my truck while the sun dipped behind the trees. "Well," he said, nudging my shoe with his, "you survived the HOA apocalypse." I laughed, a real, unfiltered laugh. I had forgotten what that sounded like too. We talked until the sky turned dark and the crickets took over the soundtrack. And somewhere in that conversation, I realized something important. The fight had been ugly, stressful, draining, but it taught me a truth I never would have learned otherwise. There will always be people who try to control what isn't theirs. People who feel powerful only when they make others feel small. People who hide behind rules so they never have to face their own flaws. But if there's one thing stronger than their control, it's the moment you decide you're done being controlled. The moment you stop shrinking. The moment you step forward and say, "This ends today." Standing there in the quiet hum of the night, looking at the land I fought so hard to protect, I finally understood. Peace isn't something you find. Peace is something you defend. And as the breeze moved through the tall grass and the stars blinked awake overhead, I whispered the final truth this whole ordeal had taught me. Some battles aren't fought to win. They're fought to remind you what's worth keeping. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next part.